Good day and welcome to PCR118, that is Introduction to Migration and Globalization. It's a pleasure to have you, and in this course you will learn quite a lot, as I've said in the welcome video. Today we will be looking into some definitions of the key words or key terms. What exactly is migration? What is globalization? What are the components of globalization? Why do we study migration? What is the global context of both migration and globalization? It is my belief that at the end of the week, that you will have been able to have a good comprehension of the multidimensional nature of migration and globalization, because there is no single definition of migration, as indeed varieties of definitions by scholars for both migration and globalization. So I want you to note that, and then you will be able not only to have a knowledge, but to be able to comprehend and synthesize the definition without creating any definitional challenges during the course of our meeting in this class. You will be able to synthesize theories and analyze them in reality by applying real events. What exactly do we mean? We are saying that your learning at the end of the day will not be based primarily on theories. We will validate or invalidate such theories or concepts with real-time events, so that we have a mix of theory and real event, and then we become much more better informed. You will be able to evaluate the role of population in migration mapping. Remember, in the syllabus I shared with you and the introductory video, we mentioned that we will be looking at map and mapping. So population is a major ingredient of migration mapping. Population is a major consequence of migration and indeed globalization, because people move from one place to the other. Non-human beings are moved from one place to the other. And then the convergence of culture through trade and commerce will also depend on population. And that is why at the end of the day, you will be able to evaluate the role, the important role of population in migration mapping. Lastly, you will be able to connect the nexus between migration and globalization. The question arises, what exactly is migration? What comes to your mind? Again, you have to remember that I said there is no major acceptable definition because of the differences that should be expected among scholars. But we can deduce the following: that migration is generally accepted as a movement of human and non-human beings from one location to the other. So the underlining and guiding principle there is movement. There must have been a movement, whether it is temporary or permanent, from one place, one location, one region, one state to another. Migration also could be as a result of a group movement, as we will study the Bantu in the course of this semester. A group that left what is today the Niger-Benue confluence area around the 2nd century BC and moved all the way to the southern part of Africa, creating a multicultural environment, influencing and accepting culture and way of life as they move. It could also be by individual that would like to better himself or herself. Somebody moving, say for instance, from Nigeria to Canada because of the opportunity of expertise, relocation, and possibility of a better life. It could be voluntary as a result of situation within one's current location, and it could be a forced migration, that involuntary, as we have it in the past and indeed in the present. The transatlantic slave trade, the trans-Saharan slave trade, the trade through the Indian Ocean are good examples in the past. But what about a kind of mixed voluntary and forced that is ongoing in current dispensation? You have youth moving from maybe Nigeria, Ghana, Niger Republic, through the Sahara and reaching Libya and trying to cross the Mediterranean into Europe. They have reasons for doing that. That is also part of migration. It is also part of voluntary, semi-voluntary, forced, perhaps because they were lured by those who promised them better life. But above all, migration is the creation of a new settlement. The creation of a new settlement, whether as a group or as an individual, whether forced or voluntary, it results into what? A new settlement, whereby the migrant will now settle, adapt, and perhaps recreate himself or herself or themselves, as in the case of African Americans creating the Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa, a reflection of the triadic relationship, that is the connection between their origin in Africa and their current place of domicile in the Americas. So you can see the multidimensional definition, okay, of migration. The question then is, what are the types or varieties of migration, and indeed the consequence of migration? Let us address the consequence, the major consequence. And I'm saying this because we will focus more on it in the course of the semester. Is population shift. Population. It could decrease the population in an area. Say, for instance, those fleeing away from insurgency, banditry, and insecurity in their location. Definitely the population in that area will be reduced. And there will be upshoot of population in their new settlement area. So population is important. The shift as a result of immigrants or as a result of emigrants, that is, emigrant meaning those who left their place and then relocated to another country or region. And we will talk more about the various definitions. Well, when we talk about the types, there are two major types of migration: internal and international or external. But internal migration will mean a regular pattern whereby a group or an individual temporarily relocate from one region to another within the same country, from one country to another. It could be within the same continent or outside of that continent. It is still within, based on the geographical definition and description. It is circular. It is circular in the sense that we have, people leaving one location for the other and without necessarily losing their identity. The second type of migration is international. It is an immigration outside the country, and it includes immigrants and emigrants. By immigrants, the good example is to say somebody leaving South Africa for Nigeria, and he or she, or as a family, decided to stay in Nigeria either permanently or temporarily. So that group are immigrants. But if somebody is living his or her own country for another country, we now say they are emigrants. In other words, they are either rejecting, say for instance, their citizenship for the other country and taking up the citizenship of that country. They are emigrants. In other words, you're living in your place of birth. And these are important in our study of migration. Let us quickly, at this point, move on to globalization. What is globalization? It's also important for us to understand the definition to be able to connect or identify how it is relevant to our discussion or our study of migration. It is the convergence of global culture and trade and commerce. When a group moved or they leave their comfort zone to seek better opportunities or for resources, as in the case of the European explorers, beginning in the 15th century, for instance, exploring the West Coast and discovering many other parts of the world, then we can say the consequence will be global culture, trade and commerce. Do not be bothered about whether the trade is fair or not fair, but the component of that definition of globalization in this context that I need you to remember and to take note of is the fact that it is a convergence of global culture, trade, and commerce. Globalization also is the integration of economies and international influence. Okay. It is about economic matters. It's about getting the materials for the industries. It's about getting labor from one area to another to fuel development, to encourage development. But more importantly, it is also about fusion of businesses with common goals, or a mix of businesses with common goal, leading to a conglomeration of multinational companies. But globalization in our context should and will not be divorced of technology. Technology has really fueled globalization. Imagine your phone. You can communicate. You can trade from your bedroom and transfer money and do businesses in this century and the century before. That is what globalization is about. Ease of businesses, ability to create wealth for oneself. Although it has its negative side, but on the whole, it has really brought together the world. We can trade, we can transfer goods and services, and we can meet one another in the shortest possible time. Imagine the 15th century or centuries before, when it takes 6 months, a year to move maybe from Japan to Mombasa in East Africa, or from the west coast of West Africa to the Americas. Today, you can hop on the plane and off you go. Boom, you are there. You're flying from Dakar to Washington, Dulles. You're looking at about 5 hours flight. From Lagos to Atlanta, you're looking at about 10 hours. Direct flights. From Abuja to London, you're also looking at between 5 to 6 hours. This globalization has cut off the huge length, months, that people will have come about trading and engaging in business. And it is, on the whole, an important area of human development. What then are the components of globalization? One, as I've mentioned before, technology. Technology, very important. The discovery of how to navigate in the 15th century changed human history. Henry the Navigator and all the explorers were able to cover the world, were able to leave Europe and get to the Americas and circumnavigate Africa and get to Asia because of technology. The compass, the astrolabe, the ability to build a ship that will move faster is part of globalization and what we enjoy today. Today we have varieties of aircraft and airplanes that can reach and accommodate more people and transport more people, more goods. So technology is very important. The development of apps, applications that also fast track the nature of how we do businesses, either in the banking, shipping industry, are good examples. What about capital mobility? Today, we do not have to carry cash. We have our cards, credit card, bank card, business card, and then we can easily agree on the terms. And then there's that inflow of cash, credit transfer, debit transfer between one company and the other, between an individual and the other. Labor mobility is also an important part of globalization. The ability for experts to move from their region to the other. Okay. Today we can talk about H1, H2 visas in the developed economy to attract experts, specialized skills from the developing to the developed. Of course, the consequences on the part of the developing economy is not really good. However, the ability of labor to move and utilize their expertise, have access to better resources is also an important thing that I want you to remember. When we talk about technology and transportation, we begin to look at mechanized transportation. Gone are the days when you have to rely on the cattle and the sheep, to navigate or to paddle the boat and what have you. Today you have mechanized ships. We have mechanization even on our farms to transport, the produce from one point to the other. And these are results of globalization because globalization itself brought about that idea of innovation and creativity. Globalization also involves lower tariff and tax reliefs. Okay, lower tariffs and tax relief. It encourages companies to be set up from their own country in another country. It is indeed a conglomeration of international companies. Let's quickly look at some of the more, keywords. Migrant. Who is a migrant? The person that moved or relocated from one region or country to another. A refugee, you must note, very, very be careful about this. Refugees are not migrants because they did not leave or move, in most cases voluntarily. So they do not fall within the definition of a migrant. And it could be confusing because you'll be wondering, well, let's take for instance, you have Mexicans trying to cross either from Arizona or from Texas into the United States, and they declare themselves refugees. Or you have Africans crossing the Mediterranean and get to island within the European nations, and then they claim to be a refugee. Are they not migrants? Whereby the international definition, they are not, until they are accepted by the host country. So it's a totally different situation. The other keyword that I want you to remember and to take note of is the push factor and the pull factor. The push factor and the pull factor. And these are very, very important in understanding both globalization and migration. The pull factors are those reasons that attract people to a new location. What attracts someone, for instance, from Lagos to Kano, or from Accra to Johannesburg? So those factors, maybe better life, maybe ability to set up a company, maybe trading with a partner. Then the push factors are why people might want to leave the place where they are living currently for another. That is the push factor. What exactly is driving an individual or even a company? Is we are treating both migration and globalization to want to move. Okay. Internally displaced persons are also important, and you will see us repeating it. You'll see it in the reading of some of the text as well as the videotape, educational videotapes. They are called the IDPs. They were forced from their place of settlement either as a result of terrorists, bandits, insurgencies, kidnapping, and they are concentrated officially and recognized as such. And these are common in major parts of Africa or developing economies. For instance, it's a common thing that those who are affected by Boko Haram terrorists are in all parts, south, central, and southern part of Nigeria. And they are catered for by the government. Why do we study migration? And why do we even study globalization? I want you to know that there are two main types for you to remember that we mentioned it before. I want you also to remember the reasons that we've just defined. But to answer the question why, we should begin to also remember some of the items listed. But let me emphasize the environmental condition. The environmental condition is very key. Take, for instance, desertification of the Sahara. In human history, it led to huge migration south of the African continent. The desiccation of the Sahara, a flourishing grain pastored area before the 2nd century BC, as a result of environmental change, led to movement of people, majorly south, for better pastoring and grain environment. Indeed, the movement of the Bantu further south is also attributed to the environment and the decline in the usability and productivity of the land where they were currently domiciled. The other reason why we study migration is employment and educational advancement. Whether you earn a scholarship to study outside of your country, or you paid your way to study outside of your country, you are either temporarily or permanently migrating. So the opportunity to have an advanced education, to advance your skill and be better employable is one of the reasons why we study migration, because it revolves around labor mobility, the ability of that labor. Because of your skill, you can move. Take, for instance, because of my skill, I was able to relocate from London some years ago in the 90s to the United States. And one was given that opportunity to teach and impart knowledge. So with a PhD in hand, that opportunity was open and I took it. In current dispensation, most Indians, Nigerians, and nationals of other countries have utilized the H1 and H2 visa, or what they call the skilled visas, to make a better life for themselves. So we need to historicize, we need to analyze, we need to evaluate the reason for this, as well as the consequences, either negative or positive, on the economies in their homeland and on the economy of their new homes where they currently settled. Let us round up this lecture by looking or asking ourselves, what is the global context? Why globalization? Why migration? Why is migration a global phenomenon that we need to study and have a better understanding of? Of course, the historical antecedent is something we should not forget, because the historical past and present will inform the future and beneficial to policy formulation, as in the creation of centers of excellence in migration and global studies. In some countries, in the case of Nigeria, you have the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, TED Fund, investing heavily in such centers of excellence. Second, European exploration and colonialism. The exploration that began in the 15th century led to colonization, discovery of so many parts of the world by the Europeans, but colonialism that led to underdevelopment of such areas, as in the case of Africa and Asia. The emergent economic system and global institutions, the South and North divide, even in the midst of the Cold War politics, are part of what we call the global context of migration and globalization. But majorly the poverty and disparities consequent upon policies and regulations that are majorly not fair to the developing economies also explain the post-colonial situation of some of these countries. And it is on this note that we will round up the lecture for today. I hope you will do the readings. I implore you to check the chat room and see the assignments, respond to those comments by your fellow students, complete the readings, and let us continue the interaction, the inclusive pedagogy in the chat room and when next we meet. So I wish you well, and then until we meet again, I am Professor Akim Ebekunle Tijani, your instructor, and may you stay blessed. Thank you.